The galaxy was old. It had seen wars rise and fall, empires grow and die, and species vanish into silence. For thousands of years, the powerful had ruled the weak, and no new race had ever managed to stand against the giants that already controlled the stars. The galaxy had grown used to this rhythm of power. It had grown used to watching young civilizations crushed before they could dream too high. When humanity appeared among the stars, the galaxy paid little attention at first. Humans were small, fragile creatures compared to the armored species of the galaxy. They were latecomers, new to space, without centuries of tradition or the vast fleets needed to protect themselves. Their world, called Earth, was just one small blue planet at the edge of a spiral arm. To the great powers, they looked like nothing more than another race destined to kneel. The Zorath Dominion, an empire older than Earth's first pyramids, saw humanity as easy prey. The Dominion had ruled through fear for 1,000 years. Their ships blotted out suns, their soldiers burned worlds, and their conquests were endless. When they declared humanity an enemy, no one in the galaxy was surprised. The other civilizations only sighed and turned away. Some pitied the humans, but most simply waited for the inevitable. The Dominion's fleets would cross the stars, and Earth would be another name erased from history. Yet something strange happened. When the Dominion scouts first reported human resistance, the galaxy expected fleets of Terran ships, desperate to defend their new colonies. But only one vessel came. A single human warship, alone, moving steadily toward the front lines where the Dominion's armada waited. The galaxy laughed. One ship? Against thousands? Surely humanity had gone mad. Surely they misunderstood how galactic war was fought. In the halls of the Shera councils, alien diplomats exchanged amused whispers. They send one ship, they said, their voices filled with disbelief. Do they not understand what waits for them? The Veari, who had once been crushed under Dominion rule, shook their heads in pity. Poor humans, they murmured. They are brave, but they will be nothing more than ash. Even the Elori, the ancient starfarers who rarely spoke, could not hide their confusion. Why only one? They asked in their quiet way. What game do the humans play? The answer was hidden within the heart of that lone vessel. The ship was called Sol Spear. It was not the largest ship the galaxy had ever seen, nor the most elegant. Compared to the Dominion's mighty dreadnoughts, it was small, almost fragile. But there was something in its design that unsettled even those who knew nothing of human engineering. Its lines were sharp, like a blade drawn in anger. Its engines burned brighter than they should have, as though carrying the fire of a world within them. Inside, the ship was alive with silence and purpose. Its crew was small, fewer than 1,000 souls, but their faces carried the same fire as their engines. They were not here for glory. They were not here to beg for mercy. Each one of them carried the weight of Earth itself, their families, their children, their species, on their shoulders. At the center of it all stood Captain Elias Cade. Elias was not the strongest man, nor the most decorated officer, but his voice had become the anchor of the crew. He looked out at the endless stars with steady eyes, and when he spoke, his words settled the fear in every heart. "We are not here to surrender," he said quietly, his voice carrying through the ship's comms. "We are not here to survive. We are here to remind the galaxy that humanity does not bow. If we fall, then we fall with our cannons roaring. And if we stand, then the galaxy will remember us forever." The words sank into the crew like steel. They knew their chances. They knew they were one ship against an empire. But in their hearts, a fire burned hotter than fear. They were humanity's spear. They were the line between Earth and extinction. The Dominion did not care for speeches or honor. To them, Sol Spear was just another target to crush. Already, their fleets were moving. Hundreds of warships gathered in formation, their weapons glowing like suns. On their flagship, Grand Admiral Terex sneered at the sight of the lone human vessel. "This is insult," he growled, his voice echoing through the command deck. "One fragile ship dares face the Dominion. They think they are warriors. No, they are fools. Crush them. Leave nothing for the worms to bury." And so the trap was set. The Dominion fleet, 200 strong, began to spread out, surrounding Sol Spear on every side. Their laughter carried across their comms, cruel and mocking. To them, it was not a battle, it was an execution. But far away, across the galaxy, countless eyes were watching. Every species tuned their vision toward the conflict. Some waited for the humans to be destroyed. Others waited for the first shot, wondering if perhaps something different might happen. The galaxy leaned closer. They did not know it yet, but history was about to change. For the humans had not sent one ship out of weakness. They had not come with empty hands. They had come with fire. And when their cannons roared, the galaxy would finally understand. The Soul Spear drifted through the void, silent and steady. To an outsider, it looked like nothing more than a single fragile ship. But to the crew inside, it was everything. It was home, it was a shield, and it was humanity's last message to the stars. The corridors of the ship were quiet, filled with the faint hum of engines and the pulse of machines that kept them alive. Men and women worked at their stations with calm focus, though their eyes betrayed the truth. Fear lived in their hearts, but so did determination. Every crew member knew the odds. They were not children dreaming of victory, they were soldiers, ready to burn for Earth if that was what it took. At the command bridge, Captain Elias Cade stood tall. His uniform was worn, the shoulders scarred by years of service. His hands rested lightly on the rail in front of him, and his eyes never left the black horizon. Stars burned around them, but ahead lay the Dominion's fleet, 200 warships waiting like wolves. "Report," Elias said softly. "Engine stable," replied Chief Engineer Mara, her voice tired but steady. "Weapons at full charge. Shields at 80% capacity. Crew is ready, Captain." Elias nodded. His crew's courage filled him with pride. They were not perfect soldiers. Some were miners from the colonies, others were farmers, engineers, or dreamers who had chosen to fight when the Dominion threatened their home. Yet here they stood, aboard Soul Spear, facing a fleet that could blot out the stars. He turned toward them and spoke, not loudly, not as a commander demanding obedience, but as one human speaking to another. "We all know what waits for us," he said. "We all know the Dominion believes this ship is already dead. But I tell you this, we are not here to die quietly. We are here to show the galaxy what it means to be human. If we burn with the fire of Earth itself. If we fall, then let our fall shake the stars." A silence fell across the bridge. Then slowly, one by one, the crew lifted their heads. Fear was still there, but now it lived beside something stronger. Hope. The ship itself was a marvel, though few outside Earth understood it. While other species built fleets that looked like floating palaces, humanity had built Soul Spear with a single thought: survival. Every part of the ship was designed with one purpose: to fight, to endure, and to strike harder than anything the galaxy had seen before. Its armor was layered with new alloys, created in desperate years of war research. Its engines carried human ingenuity, burning hotter and faster than Dominion ships thought possible. And its weapons were unlike anything the galaxy remembered. In the days before faster-than-light travel, humanity had learned to hurl steel with unimaginable force. Cannons that fired shells faster than sound, faster than sight. On Earth, those weapons had once been old. But in the hands of human engineers, they had been reborn into something terrifying. Massive rail cannons lined the spear's spine, each one capable of tearing through ship armor as if it were paper. To other species, it was madness. Why throw metal when energy beams and plasma existed? But humans trusted in the brutal simplicity of impact. When the crew looked at those cannons, they felt strength. They felt Earth itself breathing through the ship. Across the galaxy, other races continued to whisper as Soul Spear sailed forward. In the crystal towers of the Shera councils, alien voices debated. "They are reckless," one ambassador said. "They send one ship where fleets should march. They have no chance." But another voice, quieter, wondered aloud. "Or perhaps they know something we do not." On the hidden world of the Vayari, survivors of Dominion conquest gathered around screens to watch the coming battle. Their hearts ached with memory, for they had once tried to resist as well, and failed. Tears shone in their eyes as they saw the small human vessel moving alone. "Why fight?" some asked. "Why throw themselves away?" But others whispered, almost in prayer. Maybe they will succeed where we could not." Even the ancient Elori, hidden among their endless libraries, watched in silence. They did not laugh, nor did they pity. They only leaned forward, their old eyes glimmering, as if they saw in humanity something long forgotten. Back on Soul Spear, Captain Elias prepared his crew for the coming storm. "Communications open," he ordered. "Yes, Captain." The Dominion's voice soon filled the bridge, cruel and mocking. "Human vessel," the Admiral's voice thundered. "You are surrounded. You face the Dominion's fleet. You will surrender now, or be erased from existence." The crew waited for Elias to respond. He did not rush. He let the silence stretch until even the Dominion grew restless. Then he spoke, his voice calm and sharp like a blade. "This is Sol's spear. We do not surrender." The Dominion laughed, the sound echoing like thunder. "One ship against the might of the Dominion. You are nothing. You are already dead." But Elias only whispered, almost to himself, "Then let us show you how the dead fight." The Dominion fleet moved, engines flaring. Hundreds of warships spread into a circle around the spear, weapons aimed and glowing. They thought it was over before it had begun. But inside the spear, the crew stood ready. Hands tightened on controls. Engineers whispered prayers to themselves. Gunners laid their fingers across the triggers, feeling the hum of their great cannons. The galaxy watched. The trap was closing. The execution was about to begin. Yet Sol's spear did not falter. It sailed straight into the fire. And in that moment, every heart in the crew burned with the same thought. If this was their end, then let the galaxy never forget how humanity roared. The galaxy was wide and ancient, but news always traveled fast. When the Zorath Dominion moved its armada to intercept the lone human ship, every eye turned toward that battlefield in the stars. It was not just curiosity, it was hunger. Civilizations long crushed under Dominion rule wanted to see if the humans would resist, even for a moment. Neutral powers, always cautious, wanted to know if humanity was truly foolish enough to throw away its future on one desperate gamble. And the other great empires watched with pride and arrogance, eager to mock yet another race daring to dream beyond its station. Everywhere, the questions spread like fire. Why only one ship? In the halls of the Shera councils, their glass towers glittering under starlight, diplomats debated with sharp voices. "They send one?" asked Councillor Lethan, his scales shimmering with disbelief. "Have they no sense? The Dominion's fleets cannot be fought with pride. This is suicide." Another councillor, old and thoughtful, shook her head. "Perhaps they do not fight for victory. Perhaps they fight for memory. Perhaps they want the galaxy to know their courage before they fall." But a third voice, quieter than the rest, whispered something different. "Or perhaps," it said, "the humans believe one ship is enough." On the hidden refugee world of the Vayari, families gathered around small glowing screens. These people had once known the Dominion's chains, and their wounds had never fully healed. Mothers held children close, and fathers clenched their fists as they watched the human vessel sail into the trap. "They will die," one elder said bitterly. "The Dominion is too strong. No one can stand against them." But his granddaughter, her small eyes wide with hope, asked, "What if they win?" The room fell silent. The question felt too dangerous, too heavy, but it lingered in their hearts like a spark refusing to die. Even in the ancient libraries of the Elori, where silence was older than many stars, whispers stirred. The Elori rarely spoke, rarely cared for the noise of galactic politics. But now they leaned forward in their timeless halls, watching the humans with interest. "These ones are strange," murmured one scholar, her voice like wind over stone. "They are young, but they carry themselves like an old race." Another nodded. "They remind me of a fire long ago. A fire that burned too bright for the galaxy to forget." And so the Elori waited, their eyes unblinking, to see whether this fire would burn or fade. On the Dominion flagship, Grand Admiral Terex stood at the center of his bridge, his armor gleaming under the lights. His eyes burned with contempt as he studied the lone human ship on his screens. "This insult cannot be tolerated," he snarled. "One ship dares face the Dominion. It is mockery. They will be erased, and their world will follow." His officers laughed, their voices cruel and sharp. To them, this battle was not war, it was execution. The humans had chosen their death. All the Dominion had to do was deliver it. Back on Sol's spear, the crew worked in silence. The Dominion's laughter and threats echoed through their comms, but no one listened. They had already made peace with the truth. This battle would not be about survival. It would be about meaning. Chief Engineer Mara checked her panels again and again, her hands trembling though she tried to hide it. She whispered under her breath, not to anyone in particular but to the ship itself, "Hold together, my love. Just hold together long enough." In the weapons deck, Gunner Rylan kissed the small photo of his daughter taped beside his console. "She will remember me," he said quietly. "She will know her father fought." And in the medical bay, Dr. Hale prepared what little supplies he had. He knew soon the beds would be full, the air heavy with smoke and blood. Yet he carried himself with calm, because he understood, his work was not to save everyone, but to give them dignity in their final fight. As the spear sailed closer, the Dominion fleet spread into formation. 200 warships, their weapons glowing like suns, slowly encircled the lone human vessel. It was a sight meant to terrify. It was a show of power the Dominion had repeated countless times across history. But this time, something was different. The spear did not slow. It did not turn away. It sailed forward, steady and unshaken, like a predator walking into the jaws of a larger beast. And the galaxy noticed. On distant worlds, the silence grew heavy. People who had laughed now leaned closer, their voices caught in their throats. There was something in the way that ship moved, something in the way its crew held their ground. It was not arrogance. It was not foolishness. It was purpose. On the bridge of the spear, Captain Elias Cade watched as the Dominion's fleet grew larger on his screens. His heart was heavy, but his eyes were sharp. He could feel the weight of the galaxy pressing against him, watching, waiting, doubting. He spoke to his crew one last time before the storm began. "The galaxy wonders why we send one ship," he said softly. "They wonder if we are weak, or if we are foolish. Let them wonder. Let them laugh. Soon, they will understand. Soon, they will hear our roar." The crew answered not with words, but with silence and resolve. Their hands tightened on their stations. Their eyes hardened. They were ready. And so the stage was set. 200 warships of the Dominion, gleaming with the pride of centuries. One battered human vessel, carrying the fire of a single world. Across the galaxy, billions held their breath. The trap was closing. The executioner was raising his blade. But somewhere deep in the silence of space, something older and stronger than fear began to stir. For this was not the end. This was the beginning. The beginning of the roar. The stars were silent. The Dominion fleet had finished its circle, 200 warships forming a wall of steel and fire around the lone human vessel. Their weapons glowed, hungry to burn, their engines roared like thunder in the void. The trap was complete. On the Dominion flagship, Grand Admiral Terex stood with cold pride. His claws rested on the edge of his command throne as he gazed at the image of Sol's spear. The small human ship floated before him like prey surrounded by hunters. "Begin transmission," he ordered. A moment later, his voice thundered across the void, filling the human ship with cruel laughter. "Humans! You are surrounded. You face the Dominion's armada. Surrender your vessel, surrender your world, and perhaps we shall allow your kind a slow death instead of a quick one." The officers around him chuckled. They had seen this many times before, weak races crushed before the might of the Dominion. To them, it was already over. Inside Sol's spear, the bridge was quiet. The crew listened to the threat, but no one flinched. They had heard this before. They had studied the Dominion's cruelty, their endless list of conquered worlds. They knew exactly what awaited them if they surrendered. Captain Elias Cade stood at the center of the bridge, his hand resting on the console. His eyes never left the glowing enemy ships on the screen. For a long moment, he said nothing. His silence pressed against the air like a weight. Then, softly but clearly, he gave his order. "Fire!" The galaxy expected beams of light, waves of plasma, or missiles streaking across the void. That was how wars were fought now, bright, beautiful, almost like art. But humanity did not believe in art when it came to war. Humanity believed in thunder. The first roar shook the void. Sol Spear's massive rail cannons unleashed their fury. Metal projectiles, each the size of a car, hurled forward at impossible speeds, faster than sound, faster than sight. The shells cut through space like angry gods. The first Dominion battleship never stood a chance. Its shields flared, cracked, and shattered as the round tore through it, splitting the vessel in half. Fire spilled into the void. Another ship behind it was struck in the same instant, its hull caving in as if crushed by an invisible hammer. And then another. And another. In the first volley alone, 5 Dominion warships died. The galaxy went silent. On distant worlds, millions stared in shock at their screens. No one had expected it. No one had believed one human ship could strike so hard, so fast. Civilizations that had laughed now sat in stunned silence, their mouths dry. On the Vayari refugee world, tears ran down faces as they saw Dominion ships burning. For the first time in centuries, they felt something dangerous in their hearts, hope. In the towers of the Shera councils, diplomats leapt from their seats in disbelief. "Impossible," one shouted. "How can primitive weapons cause such destruction?" But the older counselor only whispered, not primitive. Efficient. And in the silent libraries of the Elori, ancient scholars leaned forward, their eyes burning like stars. Ah, one murmured, so the fire was not lost after all. On the Dominion flagship, Admiral Terex's smile vanished. His eyes widened as the reports came in, 5 ships gone in seconds, their crews lost. His officers stammered in disbelief, but Terex roared above them. Fools! Do not falter! Fire everything! The Dominion fleet answered with fury. Beams of plasma shot across the void, streaks of missiles raced toward the spear, and the void became a storm of light. Every weapon turned toward the lone human vessel. Inside Sol's spear, the world shook. The ship shuddered as plasma struck its shields, as missiles exploded against its armor. Lights flickered, alarms screamed. The crew held on, teeth clenched, sweat pouring down their faces. Chief Engineer Mara shouted from her station, "Shields at 60%. Armor holding for now." Captain Elias did not waver. His voice was calm, steady, like an anchor in the storm. "Return fire. Do not stop. Show them who we are." Again the cannons roared. The thunder of steel ripped through the void. One Dominion cruiser exploded in a storm of fire. Another was crippled, its engines torn apart. A third simply vanished, split into debris by a single shell that struck its core. Every shot was not just a weapon. It was a message. This was humanity's roar. The galaxy no longer mocked. They no longer whispered in amusement. They stared in awe and in fear. One ship against hundreds, and already the Dominion had bled more than any of them thought possible. But victory was not free. Inside Sol's spear, smoke filled the corridors. Fires burned in the lower decks. Dozens of crew were already gone, their bodies broken by the fury of the Dominion's return fire. Yet no one begged to stop. No one asked to retreat. In the weapons deck, Gunner Ryland's hands bled as he slammed another shell into the chamber. His voice cracked with pain, but he kept loading. "Keep it coming," he whispered. "For my daughter, keep it coming." In the medical bay, Dr. Hale worked with trembling hands, wrapping wounds as the ship shook around him. He did not cry. He did not scream. He only whispered to the dying, "You are not alone. You fought well. Rest now." Every life lost was a wound to the ship, but it was also a spark to keep the fire burning brighter. On the bridge, Elias knew the truth. They were outnumbered. They were surrounded. They were one ship against an empire. And yet, they were not defeated. Not yet. He looked at his crew, at the fire in their eyes, and he spoke again. "Let them hear us. Let the galaxy hear the roar of Earth. We are Sol's spear. And we do not break." The cannons fired once more. The roar echoed across the stars. And the galaxy finally understood. Humanity had come not with weakness, not with arrogance, but with wrath. The void was no longer silent. It burned with light and fire. The Dominion's fleet poured its fury into Sol's spear, and space itself seemed to tremble under the storm. Plasma beams lit the dark like angry suns. Missiles streaked forward like a rain of death. Explosions bloomed around the lone human vessel, each one strong enough to erase a city. To the galaxy, it looked like the end. Inside Sol's spear, the ship shook violently. Sparks flew from consoles, alarms screamed in every corridor, and smoke filled the air. Crew members shouted over the chaos as the Dominion's weapons hammered them again and again. "Shields failing!" Mara cried from the engineering console, sweat running down her face. "They're at 30%. Hold them together." Elias ordered, his voice steady despite the storm. Another impact slammed into the ship, throwing crew members from their seats. One of the side corridors exploded, sealing itself with emergency bulkheads as fire consumed it. Dozens of lives were lost in seconds, but no one stopped. No one begged for retreat. This was their duty. This was their roar. The Dominion had expected the human ship to fall quickly, but it did not. Blow after blow struck Sol's spear, yet still the ship endured. Its armor cracked, its shields flared, but its heart still beat. And then came the thunder. The rail cannons roared once more, and another Dominion cruiser split in half. The shockwave of the explosion rippled across the void. The gunners cheered through bloody lips, their hands trembling with exhaustion, but their eyes burning with pride. "For Earth!" Gunner Ryland screamed as he fired again, his voice raw. The shell ripped through another Dominion ship, tearing its engines apart. The galaxy watched in awe. The human vessel bled, but it fought like no other. Each shot was not just a weapon, it was defiance made real. On the Dominion flagship, Admiral Terex slammed his clawed hand against the railing, his voice thundering in fury. "Enough! Focus fire! Tear that ship apart!" His officers scrambled, redirecting power to their weapons. The Dominion fleet tightened its formation, pouring concentrated fire into Sol's spear. Beams of plasma struck again and again, shields collapsing under the endless storm. Inside the human ship, lights went dark. Consoles flickered, engines groaned, and walls shuddered under the fury of the enemy. "Shields gone!" Mara shouted, her voice breaking. "We're down to armor." The crew braced themselves as the ship shook again. One section of the hull caved in, sucking dozens into the void before emergency barriers sealed the breach. Their screams echoed in the minds of those who lived, but the ship did not stop. Captain Elias gripped the rail, his knuckles white. He felt the weight of every life lost pressing on him, but he stood tall. His voice carried through the chaos like a flame refusing to die. "Fire again!" And they did. The cannons roared, tearing through yet another Dominion warship. Even as their own ship burned, humanity struck back. The roar echoed across the void, louder than fear, louder than death. Far across the galaxy, those who watched felt their hearts race. On the refugee world of the Vayari, cheers erupted as Dominion ships fell. Mothers held children close and whispered, "Do you see? Do you see? They fight back." Tears streamed down faces, but they were not tears of sorrow, they were tears of hope. In the Shera councils, silence filled the chambers. Those who had mocked humanity now stared with wide eyes. "One ship," a counselor whispered. "One ship is doing this." Even in the timeless halls of the Elori, the ancient scholars leaned forward, their voices hushed with awe. "They bleed," one said, "yet they roar louder still. This is humanity." But inside the spear, the price of defiance was heavy. Dr. Hale worked tirelessly in the medical bay, his hands covered in blood. Wounded crew filled every bed, their cries echoing in the smoke-filled air. He stitched wounds, stopped bleeding, whispered comfort. Some he saved, many he could not. Yet he never stopped moving. "You are not alone," he whispered to each dying soldier. "You fought bravely. Rest now." Every loss was a wound to the crew, but it was also fuel for their fire. With every comrade that fell, the survivors gritted their teeth harder, their hands steadied, their hearts burned brighter. The battle raged on. The Dominion pressed harder, pouring everything they had into destroying the lone human vessel. But Sol's spear moved like a predator, weaving through firestorms, enduring hit after hit, and always striking back. Another rail cannon shell tore through the Dominion flagship's escort, sending it into a spiral of flame. Another missile from the spear detonated inside a cruiser's hangar, turning it into a ball of fire. The humans fought with fury that shook the stars. On the bridge, Captain Elias stood tall despite the smoke, despite the wounds, despite the chaos. His voice was calm, steady, unbroken. "Listen to me," he said, his words carrying across the comms to every deck. "We are one ship against hundreds. We are bleeding. But we are not defeated. Every shot we fire tells the galaxy who we are. We are humanity. We endure. We fight. We roar." The crew answered with a single thunderous word, shouted from 1,000 throats. "Roar!" And once more, the cannons unleashed their fury. The void shook. Dominion ships burned. And the galaxy, wide and ancient, finally began to understand. This was not just a battle. This was a message. Humanity had come to teach the stars what it meant to stand unbroken. The battlefield was no longer just metal and fire, it was a storm of will. Dominion ships still poured their fury into Sol's spear, but every time the human ship roared back, the galaxy felt it in their bones. Yet the cost was becoming unbearable. Inside the spear, corridors were littered with debris. Fires burned in sealed chambers. The walls groaned with each new impact. Crew members staggered through smoke, carrying the wounded, ignoring their own pain. Every corner smelled of metal, blood, and burned wiring. Dr. Hale's medical bay overflowed. He moved like a man possessed, shouting for bandages, for plasma packs, for help. His voice was firm, but his eyes betrayed the weight of loss. Dozens lay still, covered by sheets. The living pressed on because there was no other choice. "Another wave coming." Mara cried from engineering, her voice hoarse. "They're locking us down." The ship shook again, hard enough to throw Elias against the rail. He steadied himself, his knuckles bleeding from the impact. For a moment, silence pressed on his heart, the silence of doubt, of despair. Could one ship truly stand against this storm? He looked around at his crew. Faces blackened with soot, uniforms torn, eyes red from smoke, but none had surrendered. They looked at him, waiting, holding their faith in his words. And Elias found his voice. He opened the comms. His words echoed not just within the spear but across the battlefield. The Dominion had cracked into human frequencies, and so had countless others watching the clash. His message traveled farther than he had intended, into refugee worlds, neutral systems, even enemy ears. "This is Captain Elias of Sol's Spear," he said, his voice steady, carrying across the chaos. "We are one ship, one crew. We face an empire of thousands. And yet, we are still here." The bridge fell silent as his voice thundered through the speakers. Even the Dominion's weapons slowed for a breath, as if the void itself paused to listen. "You ask why humanity came with one ship," Elias continued. His eyes burned as he spoke. "It was not arrogance. It was not pride. It was because one ship was enough to show the truth. We do not measure strength in numbers. We measure it in spirit, in courage, in sacrifice." The crew listened, their pain fading for a moment, their hearts rising with his words. "You cannot break us," Elias said, his voice growing louder. "Every strike you deliver only proves our resolve. Every life you take fuels our fire. We may fall here, but our roar will never die. The galaxy will hear it, and it will never forget humanity." The message carried. On the distant world of Vayar, refugees huddled around broken comms. They listened to Elias's voice and wept, clinging to each other. "Do you hear him?" one mother whispered. "They fight for us. They fight for all of us." In the neutral councils of the Shera, leaders who once dismissed humanity now sat frozen, the sound of Elias's words echoing in their grand chambers. One counselor whispered, trembling, "This is no ordinary species. This is fire given form." Even in the dark halls of the Dominion itself, soldiers shifted uneasily. Some lowered their eyes, their claws trembling as they heard the human captain's voice echo into their ears. For the first time, they felt fear, not of weapons, but of spirit. Back on the battlefield, the Dominion answered with rage. "Destroy them!" Admiral Terex roared from his flagship. His eyes burned with fury. "Silence that voice forever!" A storm of fire struck the spear. Hull plating ripped open. The left side of the ship erupted in flame. Alarms screamed. Inside, chaos erupted again. Mara screamed orders, trying to stabilize engines that were tearing themselves apart. Rylan fired the cannons with bloody hands, his teeth clenched so hard they cracked. Dr. Hale pressed harder, his medics collapsing one by one from exhaustion. But none stopped. None gave in. Because the captain had given them something greater than orders. He had given them meaning. The spear roared again, its cannons firing even as its own body bled. Another Dominion cruiser split apart, consumed by fire. Another escort fell silent, drifting lifelessly into the void. Each kill was bought with suffering, but each kill made the galaxy believe more strongly. Elias gripped the rail, smoke filling his lungs, his vision blurring. He coughed blood but did not fall. His voice came again, low but sharp. "Do you hear it, Dominion? That sound, that is not just steel or fire. That is humanity. And it will not die." The galaxy trembled. In the ancient libraries of the Elori, where wisdom of 1,000 species lay written, the oldest among them closed his eyes. "The tide is turning," he whispered. "The galaxy will never be the same after this roar." On hidden rebel outposts, resistance fighters raised their fists, tears burning in their eyes. "If one ship can do this," they cried, "then so can we." Even the stars themselves seemed to listen, the battlefield lit with the fury of one vessel daring to stand against an empire. But inside the spear, the cost reached breaking point. Half the decks were gone. Hundreds of crew were dead. The engines were failing. The weapons were overheating. And still the Dominion pressed in, more and more ships surrounding them like wolves. Dr. Hale looked at the wounded, his hands shaking. "We can't hold much longer," he whispered. But Elias stood tall, his voice soft but filled with fire. "We don't need to hold forever," he said. "We only need to hold long enough for the galaxy to remember." His crew looked at him, and for a moment, even in the fire, even in the blood, they smiled. Because they knew. They were not just fighting for Earth. They were fighting for everyone who had ever bowed their head in silence, for every world that had suffered under the Dominion's claws, for every voice that had been crushed. And so, as the Dominion fleet closed in, Sol's spear roared again. Not just with cannons, but with the spirit of a species that refused to kneel. The spear was breaking apart. Metal screamed as the hull tore open in places. Fires raged along the decks, consuming corridors where men and women had once stood. The once proud ship that carried the hopes of Earth was now bleeding into the void. But still, it fought. Every cannon blast shook the stars. Every missile tore holes in the Dominion's lines. Even with its body falling to pieces, the spear refused to bow. On the bridge, Elias leaned against the railing, his chest heavy, his uniform stained with soot and blood. His eyes burned with exhaustion, but they were steady. Ryland's hands were trembling over the weapons console. "Captain, we're running out of everything. Missiles, gone. Rail cannons, overheating. Shields, barely holding. I don't know how much more she can take." Mara wiped blood from her forehead, her fingers flying over the engineering console. "The engines are dying. Another hit like that, and we'll lose power completely." Dr. Hale stood silently at the back, his uniform covered in crimson. He had been patching wounds for hours, but now his face was pale, his eyes hollow. There were no supplies left to save the dying. Only his hands, shaking with the weight of too much loss. The crew looked at Elias. They didn't speak, but their eyes asked the same question. "What now?" Elias closed his eyes for a brief moment. Memories came rushing, his home on Earth, the laughter of children in the colony fields, the faces of the men and women who had followed him into this impossible fight. Then he opened them, his voice steady. "There is one thing left." Mara looked up sharply. "No, you can't mean." "Yes," Elias said. His tone was calm, but inside his chest his heart pounded like thunder. "The Nova Core." The words fell heavy in the room. The Nova Core was the spear's heart, a reactor designed not only to power the ship, but also as a last resort weapon. If detonated, it would release a storm of energy so great that everything within range, ships, fleets, even small moons, would be consumed. It was Earth's hidden card. A weapon built not to conquer, but to remind the galaxy, humanity could burn brighter than any star if pushed too far. Ryland's voice cracked. "Captain, if we use that, there's no way out. It'll take us with them." Elias looked at him, his voice low but fierce. "Ryland, look around. Do you think there's a way out now?" Silence filled the bridge. The truth was in every shaking panel, every flickering light. The spear had already given everything. There was no return to Earth. There was only a choice, die quietly, or die with meaning. Mara's hands clenched. "If we light the core, we'll take half their fleet with us." Elias nodded. "And the galaxy will know. They will remember that one ship stood, and roared, and refused to kneel. They'll know that humanity does not go quietly into the dark." For a moment, the crew was silent. Then, slowly, Ryland gave a broken laugh. "If we're going to die, Captain, let's make sure they choke on it." Mara wiped her tears with a greasy sleeve, her face shining with determination. "Then I'll keep the engines alive long enough to power the core." Dr. Hale's tired eyes softened. "And I'll stay with the wounded. None of them will be alone." One by one, the crew stood straighter, their fear melting into fire. They had no illusions left. But they had purpose. Elias opened the comms once more. His voice, though weary, carried like thunder through the stars. "To the galaxy listening, this will be our last message. We came not with an armada, but with one ship. And today, this ship will burn brighter than any sun. Remember us, not for how we fell, but for how we fought." Across 100 worlds, billions listened. Some wept. Some clenched their fists. Some, even within the Dominion, lowered their heads in shame. The spear had become more than steel. It had become a symbol. "Core sequence primed," Mara whispered, her voice breaking. "Once we start it, there's no stopping." Elias placed his hand on her shoulder, his voice quiet but firm. "Then let's begin." The alarms wailed as the Nova Core awakened. Deep within the spear, the reactor glowed like a newborn star. Energy built with terrifying speed, shaking the ship, lighting the decks in a blinding white glow. Dominion ships sensed the change. Panic spread through their lines. On the flagship, Admiral Terex's eyes widened as sensors screamed warnings. "No, it can't be. he stood from his throne, fury and fear mixing. "Destroy them! Now!" A storm of fire struck the spear. Hull plates ripped apart, decks shattered, crew thrown from their stations. But still the core burned brighter, its song growing louder, unstoppable. On the bridge, Elias looked at his crew. For a moment, all the noise seemed far away. Rylan gave a crooked smile, his eyes wet. "Hell of a ride, Captain." Mara nodded, her hand steady on the console. "She's ready. Just say the word." Dr. Hale placed a hand on the nearest rail, whispering softly, "May this light guide them home." Elias stood tall, his body broken but his spirit unbending. He looked at the stars, at the countless enemy ships closing in, and he felt no fear. Only fire. He raised his hand. "Let the galaxy hear us roar." The Nova core reached critical. A white brilliance began to swell, spreading outward, brighter than any cannon, any sun. Dominion ships scrambled, fleeing in terror. Some tried to shield themselves, but the light swallowed everything. The spear shuddered, groaned, and then it became a star. The light of the explosion spread across the stars like the birth of a new sun. For minutes, the galaxy was silent. Sensors in distant systems blinked out one by one, overwhelmed by the energy wave. Fleets across the Dominion staggered in disbelief. On neutral worlds, crowds stopped in their streets, staring upward as if the heavens themselves had spoken. The spear was gone. But in its place was something greater. On the Dominion flagship, Admiral Terex sat frozen in his chair, his claws digging deep into the armrests. His fleet had been torn apart. Hundreds of his ships were nothing but ashes, their remains drifting in the void. Never, never in the Dominion's long history, had one enemy vessel done this. "Admiral," a trembling officer whispered. They destroyed half our line." "One ship, Admiral. Just one." Terex's throat tightened. For the first time in decades, he felt fear. Not of death, but of what this meant. If humanity had built one ship like that, how many more could they build? If one captain could turn an empire's fleet to ruin, what kind of people were these humans? The officer spoke again, voice weak. "Shall we pursue Earth?" Terex stared into the fading light of the explosion, then lowered his head. "No. Not now. Not ever." The order spread like fire. The Dominion fleet retreated. And for the first time in centuries, an empire bent its knee in silence. On neutral worlds, news spread faster than light. The people of Vela lit fires in their streets, chanting in celebration. On the waterworld of Kairos, bells rang through the oceans, their sound echoing for hours. In the mining colonies of Karth, workers raised their tools to the sky, shouting through tears. The story raced from planet to planet. One ship, one human ship faced the Dominion. And it roared so loudly, the stars themselves trembled. For the oppressed, it was hope. For the fearful, it was courage. For the powerful, it was a warning. On Earth, the message arrived last. Families crowded around holoscreens, watching the final transmission of Elias Varen and his crew. His words were replayed over and over. "Remember us, not for how we fell, but for how we fought." Mothers wept. Children whispered the names of the crew. Veterans saluted with trembling hands. The whole planet stood still, knowing their sons and daughters had not died quietly, but had become immortal in sacrifice. The United Earth Council declared a day of mourning. But the people did not only mourn. They built statues. They carved the names of the Spear's crew into stone. They taught their children the story, not of loss, but of defiance. In the years that followed, the galaxy changed. The Dominion grew quieter. They no longer expanded without thought. Their fleets avoided human space like a wound that refused to heal. No ambassador admitted it, but all knew the truth. They feared another roar. Other species began to approach humanity, not with scorn, but with respect. Former enemies sent envoys, offering treaties. Old allies swore new bonds. Trade routes opened. Alliances formed. And at the center of it all was the legend of one ship. But legends are not only told in councils or carved into monuments. In quiet corners of the galaxy, rebels painted the Spear's emblem on their banners. Soldiers whispered the name Elias Varen before battle. Slaves in hidden camps prayed not to distant gods, but to the memory of those who had lit themselves brighter than a sun. The story became a fire passed from lips to lips. Do not fear the darkness. Do not bow to the Empire. Remember the Spear. On a lonely world, years later, a young cadet sat in the Academy of Earth. He studied the stars with wide eyes, listening as his instructor spoke of the spear. "They say Captain Elias chose to light the core himself," the instructor said. "He knew it meant death. But he also knew it meant life for all of us. That is the kind of strength humanity carries." The cadet clenched his fists. His chest swelled with pride. "One ship stood against an empire," he whispered. "One day, I'll serve on a ship like that." The instructor smiled sadly. "We don't build ships like the spear anymore, cadet. Not because we can't, but because we don't need to. The galaxy remembers." And still, above Earth, a monument floated in orbit. A great black spire of metal, shining in the sunlight. At its heart, carved in bright letters, were the names of every soul who had served aboard the spear. Visitors came from every corner of the galaxy. Some laid flowers. Some brought soil from their home worlds. Others only stood in silence, looking at the names, feeling the weight of what had been given. None left unchanged. In the end, the spear had been more than a ship. It was proof. Proof that humanity's strength was not in numbers, nor in technology alone, but in the fire of its spirit. Proof that even when outnumbered, outgunned, and standing alone, humans would fight, not because they expected victory, but because they refused surrender. The galaxy wondered why humanity had sent only one ship. The answer burned forever in their memory. Because one ship was enough. And in the silence between the stars, some swore they could still hear it. The roar of Sol's spear, echoing across eternity.